comprising of over 40 delegations. This would also include 13 international organizations who will be participating in the meeting. Surely it is one of the largest gathering of the foreign ministers hosted by any G20 presidency that we would be privileged to host tomorrow. The theme of India's G20 presidency, as has been enunciated repeatedly, is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, roughly translating into one earth, one family, one future. For India, the G20 presidency also marks the beginning of Amrit Kal, which will lead to the centenary of our independence towards a futuristic, prosperous, inclusive and developed society with human-centric approach at its very core. This is also the spirit which propelled us to organize the Voice of the Global South Summit in January earlier this year, which, as you are aware, saw participation of over 125 countries. During the foreign ministers meeting tomorrow, the external affairs ministers will be chairing two sessions of the foreign ministers meeting. The first session will focus on three principal sub-items. First of them relating to multilateralism. Second, something which is very crucial for the developing world, the issues related to food and energy security. And the third, the larger question of templates of development cooperation. The second session, which will focus on 4 or 5 other key issues, again relevant not just for the developing world, but also for the global community as a whole. One of them would focus on new and emerging threats. This would include naturally the challenges of countering terrorism, counter narcotics. On the more development-oriented considerations, that second session would also focus on global skill mapping, how the G20 can pool together its efforts to do global skill mapping, focus on global talent pool, and also the questions relating to humanitarian assistance and disaster risk reduction. So if you look at the agenda of the foreign ministers meeting for tomorrow, it would be broadly structured along 2 sub-verticals. One, as I said, relating to multilateralism, food, energy security and development cooperation. And the second one relating to new emerging threats, counter-terrorism, global skill mapping and HADR issues. The agenda of the foreign ministers meeting tomorrow is also situated in the larger set of priorities of India's G20 presidency, which under the vision of the Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi include 1. Inclusive and resilient growth. 2. Progress along with an action plan on the SDGs. 3. The entire rubric of green development and sustainable lifestyles, in particular the lifestyle for environment. 4. Technological transformation, including the full range of discussions and what the G20 societies can come together and contribute to the concept and the specifics of public digital infrastructure. Reforming multilateral institutions, I've already mentioned, is also among the priorities for India's G20 presidency, as also issues related to women-led development and international peace and harmony. On the sidelines of the G20 foreign ministers meeting, External Affairs Minister is also expected to meet his counterparts from other countries who are visiting Delhi for this meeting. This would naturally be an opportunity to discuss issues of bilateral importance between India and those countries with whom the minister will be meeting. Perhaps you could move the mic slightly back from that, please. Yeah, thank you. At the end of the G20 meeting tomorrow, we expect that the visiting ministers from the G20 countries and the guest countries, as also the heads of the other delegation, would also get an opportunity to call on the Honorable Prime Minister. I would end my remarks here at this stage, and if there are any questions, we'll be very happy to take them.
For the ground rules, please introduce yourself and the organization that you represent. We will try, I see too many hands, I'll try to take a few questions, but perhaps, let me start from that side. Yes, sir, you please.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ryosuke Hanada from Nikkei, the Japanese news agency, and I would like to ask you about two things. The first, Japanese foreign minister is not going to attend the G20 foreign ministers meeting this time. And what do you think of the impact on his absence on the upcoming meeting? And could you kindly share with your view on the Japanese decision? And secondly, would you be so kind as to add much more detailed explanation how India plan to amplify the voice of Global South in this meeting? Thank you.
Okay. So I'll come one by one.
Hi, sir. Siddhant from Beyond. My question is how India plans to bridge the divide between West and Russia backed by China. We saw the Indian chair statement in the finance ministers meeting. So are we expecting a joint statement after this foreign ministers meeting?
Bridge the gap, you said.
Bridge the
Okay. I have lots of questions. I saw you. Okay, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, Pranay Upadhyay from ABP News. Can you please elaborate on the bilateral engagements of the foreign minister and will the Chinese foreign minister be having will our foreign minister will be having a bilateral engagement with the Chinese foreign minister and our NSA also?
You said bilateral engagements with all of them or our NSA?
Our NSA and
Their meetings with our NSA. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hold on. I'll come back.
This is Manish Kumar Jha from Financial Express. While there are a lot of consensus on green energy and other key issues, there are also differences among the members on the Russia and Ukraine conflict. How you are addressing across the platforms and building towards the joint declaration, sir?
Wasn't the same question? Sorry, if your question is already asked, please don't repeat that. It just doesn't help. Sudhi, and then one second.
Sir, Shudhi Rajan from the Bloomberg. A question on the same line but different. Is India considering, like it did in the finance ministers meeting, naming people or naming countries that kind of come in the way of the consensus? Is there any decision in this regard?
So I think we'll hand over these 5 questions and we'll come around for another. Okay.
Thank you very much for those questions. Regarding the question from our Japanese colleague about the participation of the Japanese delegation in the G20 foreign ministers, etc. Look, you're all aware, and our friend from Japan is particularly acutely conscious of this. India and Japan have enjoyed sterling cooperation when it comes to discussions and deliberations within the G20 setting. Now, we understand that the G20, the Japanese foreign minister himself is perhaps not able to come because of his domestic compulsions, but we are looking forward to a very active participation, active support, active discussions in consultation with the Japanese delegation that is coming. We greatly value their participation, and of course their contributions have always been most helpful in taking forward the agenda of the G20. With regard to your question on the amplification of the voice of Global South, look, some of the agenda priorities that I mentioned for the foreign ministers meeting tomorrow, which are also, as I said, situated in the larger set of priorities of India's G20 presidency, clearly capture most of the concerns, issues, priorities and interest of the Global South. So when you talk of issues relating to food security, energy security, when you refer to the challenges of sustainable development templates, when you talk about the accessibility to climate finance, climate technology for the mitigation of environmental challenges, when you talk about how the world in general and the G20 in particular need to come together to focus on these priorities. These are very much, I would say, we heard it very loud and clear when we organized the Voice of Global South Summit. And that is the reason why at least some of these priorities are very directly and explicitly captured in the agenda for the G20 presidency, for the G20 foreign ministers meeting tomorrow. Another aspect which is, which may have been enunciated for the first time perhaps in the G20 setting in India, but which is extremely relevant for the rest of the world. This is the concept which my Prime Minister has always emphasized, underlined, pushed, which is the concept of Jan Bhagidari. How do you take the progress which the G20 makes, the recommendation that it stipulates, the prescriptions that it suggests in different areas, especially the ones which are important for the Global South? How do you take these recommendations outside the boardroom discussions and take it to the people? How do you take G20 and connect it to the people? That I think is very important, not just, as I said, in Indian context, which we are doing. We are one of the key planks of India's G20 presidency is to run it as a presidency of Jan Bhagidari, which is essentially the participation and the contribution of the people. But that is something which also scalable for the Global South, because the fruits of, the benefits of what gets discussed within the G20 framework, what gets decided in the G20 framework, should reach to the people for the rest of the world. So that is an amplification at the level of the people, which my Prime Minister has so strongly proposed and propagated. Siddhant, to your question and to the larger, other set of questions which may be there relating to Russia-Ukraine issue, I think yes, given the nature and the developing situation in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, naturally that would be an important point of discussions during the G20 foreign ministers meeting. Look, I have already listed out for you the two major elements of the agenda of the foreign ministers meeting tomorrow, the two sets of them. Clearly, the foreign ministers would also focus on the ongoing situation in Russia, between Russia and Ukraine. But what is it that they come out with? And more importantly, among the G20 memberships, and when they meet tomorrow and discuss this, what is the understanding that they develop? Not just on Russia-Ukraine conflict, but also on the impact of that conflict on the rest of the world, particularly the economic impact, particularly the development impact, the challenges that the developing countries face because of that conflict. I think those are equally important to focus on, of course, along with the Russia-Ukraine conflict also. So I don't think it would be really correct for me to prejudge the outcome of the G20 foreign ministers meeting. I think we should let the plenipotentiaries of the G20 foreign ministers meeting decide that on their own. But we are very clear that the foreign ministers should focus on all the priorities that are currently very relevant in the global context. I mentioned broadly the priorities which would get structured in the agenda of the two sessions tomorrow for the G20 foreign ministers meeting.
Bilateral engagements.
Yeah. On the question of bilateral engagements, look, it's EM has already started meeting many of his bilateral counterparts actually since yesterday. You would have already seen his tweets after most of those meetings, in fact probably all of those meetings, and we expect that trend to continue in the coming days, in which he would definitely try and meet all, if as many counterparts of his as possible, if not all the counterparts who are visiting, who are our guests here from since yesterday and for another next couple of days.
Next round of questions. I had okay, whole set of. Neeraj, you had a question. I held you back. One second. नहीं अभी बाद में सर बाद में कर लें questions. नीरज, we'll come back.
सर न्यूज़ 18 इंडिया से नीरज हूँ. क्या प्रधानमंत्री भी G20 विदेश मंत्रियों की बैठक को संबोधित करेंगे वर्चुअली या ऑनलाइन? दूसरा सवाल ये इससे जुड़ा, क्या किसी विदेश मंत्री की मुलाकात प्रधानमंत्री मोदी से भी होगी?
अभी तो बोला उन्होंने, पहले में आपने सुना नहीं? Okay. Okay, hold on a second. I thought, yes ma'am. One second. I had a few questions. First round I missed.
कादम्बरी शर्मा from NDTV India. क्या चीन के विदेश मंत्री के साथ द्विपक्षीय वार्ता तय है?
उन्होंने अभी कहा दो बार, आप फिर से वही क्वेश्चन दोहराएंगे तो कैसे होगा? Yes ma'am, you had a question? Yes. No. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Chiara Reed from Swiss television. It's clear that you're going to talk about Ukraine and Russia, and there are two blocks. There's the West that really wants to continue with the sanction and arm Ukraine, and there's the other bloc who wants to reach a peace and sit down to discuss. Is India profiling itself as becoming more and more the leader of this second bloc? Do you see yourself as, after 1 year, compacting behind you all the nations that have other problems and they want to mostly sit down and talk? Are you the leader of this group?
I have seen lots of hands, but I have a feeling the questions are coming out exactly the same. Okay, you said yes. Okay, let me try that. One second.
Yes, why don't you want to be
Okay, just 1 second. I think Sir has a point. On yeah, let's. I think Sir has a point. Anything on Russia, Ukraine?
And it's quite natural, you know. It is expected that there would be interest in matters relating to Russia, Ukraine. So why don't we listen to all the questions on Russia, Ukraine, and then see whether there is any difference in one with the other.
Okay.
And then
Russia,
if
Ukraine.
I've already answered, then I think we'll let it be.
Fair enough.
Really,
Let's start with, there are 5 of them. Okay, please start. There are 5 people, I saw the hands. Russia, Ukraine.
उमा शंकर सिंह NDTV इंडिया से. G20 प्रेसिडेंसी के तौर पे भारत पे बड़ी जिम्मेदारी है कि वो रूस का साथ देने वाले देशों और वेस्ट और तमाम देशों को एक साथ साध के एक जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट तक पहुँचे. इसके लिए भारत क्या कोशिश करेगा, क्योंकि जिस तरीके से फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर्स मीट में जो एक विवाद निकल कर सामने आया, क्या वही
माइक्रोफोन चल रहा है?
क्या कोई बीच का रास्ता निकाल पाने में भारत कामयाब होगा?
Okay, right behind you. Yeah.
So, Sridhar from the Asian Age here. How do you see the resolute protest by Russia and China at Bangalore? And do you fear that there could be a repeat of this in Delhi as well? And what are the efforts to prevent such a scenario? Thank you.
Sridhar from Asian Age, you should introduce yourself.
I did, sir.
Okay, I missed it. Sorry. Suhasini? You also on the Russia-Ukraine? Okay, we just exhaust all the
I have a specific, Suhasini Heather from the Hindu, sir. I have a very specific question about the wording. In the Bangalore outcome statement, the Bali document, the communique has been reproduced in paras 3 and 4. And then there is an extra addition that says Russia and China did not agree to para 3 and 4. Are we to understand that Russia and China no longer adhere to the Bali consensus and to the Bali outcome statement? And I also want to ask within that, given that in Bali, India had agreed to language that said that most countries agreed that they condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it was understood India was not a part of it. By including it in its own statement, by referring to the war in Ukraine, Russia's war in Ukraine, Is India now changing its position from the Bali statement? Thank you.
The first one, I think you should, I mean, I don't know, it's a fair question to, anyway, please. I think you should ask Russians, Chinese. Okay, please. It's okay, I heard you.
सर मैं कविता जोशी हूँ हरिभूमि न्यूज़पेपर से। सर मेरा सवाल ये है कि जो G20 के साइडलाइंस में जो मीटिंग होंगी बायलैटरल मीटिंग्स, उसमें इंडिया चाइना के जो फॉरेन मिनिस्टर्स हैं उनकी बातचीत में LAC डिस्प्यूट का जो इशू है और जो चाइना का एग्रेशन है इंडियन ओशन रीजन में, उसको क्या इंडियन फॉरेन मिनिस्टर रेस करेंगे? और सर यूक्रेन का किसी तरह का कोई पार्टिसिपेशन G20 मिनिस्टर्स की मीटिंग में क्या देखने को मिलेगा, वर्चुअल या फिजिकल?
यूक्रेन का पार्टिसिपेशन और दूसरा था कि चीनी के साथ वार्तालाप में आप Okay. Anything on Ukraine, Russia? Anybody have missed out? You said Ukraine, Russia. Is there any other question left on this topic? Please go ahead.
I'm Akhilesh Soman from Sansad TV. You know that many countries have requested India to take active part in resolving the issue between Russia and Ukraine. I have heard recently the American spokesperson of National Security Council, then the German minister also.
Yes, please, your question.
So will India push any solution, any peace path for in this G20 meeting?
You just heard PM 1 day ago, but anyway.
No, but in G20, are you going to push any solution, any path?
You have another question on this? Something different? Okay, yeah, go ahead, Nanima.
Nanima from ABP Live. Just probably a follow-up to Suhasini's question. If we know and if you have acknowledged that Russia and China will not go by the Bali Declaration language, are we going to, bring in some other language in the joint communique this time, in the foreign minister's track, or probably in the summit? If you can.
You are lucky FS is here, otherwise I was going to make a comment I held back from. You still have more question? A different point? Okay. I don't know what question could there be. Yeah, okay.
On the, how does India propose to build a consensus? I'm Poonam Davas, I'm a freelancer now. How does India propose to build a consensus, wording or whatever, particularly in view of the food and the energy security? Because India has been buying a large amount of oil from Russia, for which its actions have been criticized, and food. We stopped importing wheat. So in that context, how
I'm sorry, ma'am. Could you repeat your question? I think you said too many things. You want to know how we'll build consensus?
Yes.
Your criticism thing, but it's your comment. Please note, I'm not agreeing with that. How to build consensus? We'll have the answer on that. Which part I couldn't understand.
In view of food
that we are not
and
buying
energy
wheat.
security.
How is that related? Anyway, I take your question. Who had a question left? You had a question? And yeah. Go ahead, Manish. And then I don't know your name, ma'am.
Manish Chand, India Rights Network. Foreign Secretary, I'm talking about semantic quibbles, which so much dominates this Ukraine business formulation on Ukraine. What is our view? How do we describe what is happening? Is it an invasion? It is a war? It is a conflict? What exactly is it? What terminology are we comfortable?
You're asking the question 1 year late, but anyway.
No,
yes, ma'am, go ahead. It's okay, got your question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Runjhun Sharma from RT Russia Today.
Okay.
Just to summarize, to understand better, is this a challenge or for a fear for India at all that some of the issues that are on the agenda for India that could get overshadowed by the conflict in Ukraine and the Western pressures for India to condemn it?
Okay, I see no further question, thank God. Before I hand over the floor to sir on this, I wanted to make one comment which I think Suhasini made as well as it was followed up by Nanima. There was a text tabled in, and the reason I'm answering this is because this is beyond the foreign ministers meeting, which is on the finance ministers meeting, we tabled a text which is a chair's statement and an outcome document in which on the issue of Russia-Ukraine, we tabled paras 3 and 4, which is reproduction of the text from the Bali leaders' declaration. If two countries, Russia and China, did not agree to that, you need to ask them about why exactly, on how their perspectives, or do they no longer, are they no longer with that text from Bali? You have to ask them. This is not a speculative response. And we will see how it goes forward. I think Foreign Secretary made it pretty clear about that element on para 3 and 4. It's a repetition from Bali Declaration. Obviously, we stand by the declaration. It's our Prime Minister was there, and as Foreign Secretary will mention, our constructive role was appreciated in that. So there's no question of not agreeing to that text. We are with that text. If two countries, in this case Russia and China, have reservations about this text, you need to ask them. And arguing that that has now made a change from our position is not accurate, because in the Bali Declaration it's there and we signed up to all the paras of the Bali Declaration as the agreed text and now as a text that we have presented. That would my comment on it, sir, before I hand it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Arindam. Thank you for that large number of questions, which obviously points to extensive interest on this matter, even if the interest is not necessarily differentiated into various categories. So I'll first just broadly mention the various headings of the questions the way I have captured them. If I'm wrong, please feel free to add on to that. Joint statement, what would be there in the joint statement? आपका प्रश्न था जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट में क्या निकलेगा। वित्त मंत्री की जो मीटिंग हुई वो विवादास्पद थी, हमें तो कोई विवाद नज़र नहीं आया, आपको शायद विवाद कहीं पे नज़र आया हो उसमें। So joint statement related questions, formulations, what exactly will be there, etc. Two large, most of you asked this question with regard to Bali Declaration, how it is currently there, whether India is planning to change the Bali Declaration. Frankly, I don't know what is the evidence you have picked up to sort of signify to that. But anyway, that's a second set of question to which mostly Arindam has already replied. The third set of questions, a smaller set of questions relating to bilateral meetings. जैसे कविता जी आपका प्रश्न था कि चाइना से जब वार्ता होगी तो क्या क्या विषय उसमें होंगे। दूसरा यूक्रेन का पार्टिसिपेशन को लेके जो आपका प्रश्न था। एक प्रश्न था जो कि फूड एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी, आई थिंक मिस्टर बास का क्वेश्चन था, फूड एंड एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी को लेके और उसके कंसेंसस को लेके कोई समस्या तो इज देयर एनी प्रॉब्लम एटसेट्रा। देन दी आई थिंक द क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम देयर whether the agenda for the G20 foreign ministers meeting will get overshadowed by the question relating to Russia, Ukraine, and the first question which was asked by our Swiss colleague here on the. I'm just trying to capture that.
So to the West and
yeah,
groups, one
two groups, Russia, West and bloc, and how sort of is India in the second bloc. So I'll say what I have to say without really referring to one set of questions in particular or not. Look, let me first of all repeat what I've said in the earlier briefings also, insofar as India's position relating to Russia-Ukraine conflict is concerned. And let me start with something which came later as a categorical statement, which was my Prime Minister's statement at Samarkand, which clearly said that this is not the era of war. And if you back it up a bit, you will find that right from the start of the conflict in February last year, my Prime Minister, in his conversations with the global leadership, including the leadership from Russia, leadership of Ukraine, leadership of other countries, has clearly stated that dialogue and diplomacy is the way forward to resolve the conflict. You converge the three and you find the contribution that India made in arriving at the Bali Declaration consensus, which came out of the Bali Declaration. What would foreign ministers discuss tomorrow? What understanding they would arrive at on this subject? Whether that understanding would be to the exclusion of the other agenda items, etc., are the issues which, as I mentioned earlier on, is for the foreign ministers to discuss tomorrow and decide. I have clearly mentioned to you what is on the agenda for the G20 foreign ministers meeting tomorrow, two basket of agenda issues which are there. And clearly for us, the questions relating to the food, energy and the fertilizer security, the impact that the conflict has on these economic challenges that we face, the development cooperation templates that we want to talk about, the new and emerging threats, the problem of counterterrorism, counter-narcotics, the issues that we face on the reform of multilateralism, each one of them is a very, very significant and a substantial issue which is absolutely crucial for the global South. I have no reason to doubt that each of these agenda items will receive its due focus when the foreign ministers meet tomorrow and hold their discussions. It is not for me to prejudge the outcome of those discussions when it takes place tomorrow. You will have to await the presidency presser, which will take place tomorrow at some point. We will keep you posted on the timing and details for you to hear yourself in person as to what happens at that meeting tomorrow. कविता जी, जो आपका प्रश्न था चाइना की वार्ता को लेकर, जैसे कि मैंने कहा कि ये अपेक्षित है कि विदेश मंत्री जी अपने जितने जो द्विपक्षीय अन्य मंत्रीगण हैं उनसे भेंट वार्ता करने की उनकी अपेक्षा है. उस भेंट वार्ता में मुद्दे क्या होंगे, किन विषयों पे चर्चा होगी, वो उस मीटिंग के बाद ही उपरांत ही आपके समक्ष लाया जाए तो ज़्यादा उचित रहेगा. उसको समय उचित व्यवस्था के अंतर्गत ही प्रस्तुत किया जाए तो अच्छा है, क्योंकि उनकी क्या वार्ता है वो दो विदेश मंत्री ही आपस में निर्धारित करें तो अच्छा है. जहाँ तक यूक्रेन के निमंत्रण का प्रश्न है, देखिए ये जब हमने अपनी G20 प्रेसिडेंसी लॉन्च करने का प्रेशर किया था उस समय भी स्पष्ट रूप से अंकित किया था, चिन्हित किया था कि जो देश निमंत्रित हैं, जो गेस्ट के रूप में निमंत्रित है और जो स्वाभाविक है G20 मेंबर्स हैं, उनकी लिस्ट आप सबके समक्ष है, वो आप सब देख सकते हैं. उसमें कोई और एडिशन हमारे हिसाब से अभी नहीं है. I'm just trying to see if I missed it.
That covers broadly it, sir. I think that's what. I will not take any further questions on Russia, Ukraine, so please do not raise your hands if it's on that. Maha, please. Behind you, Maha.
Foreign Secretary Maha Siddiqui from NDTV. Sir, post the G20 foreign ministers meeting on the third morning, I understand there's a quad ministerial level meeting as well. Since the Japanese foreign minister is not coming down for the G20 foreign ministers meeting, does the quad ministerial meeting still stand? Will the deputy participate in that? And is India disappointed that despite sterling cooperation that you're talking about between India and Japan, he has chosen domestic politics over diplomacy?
I love the way you're confident that the meeting will happen and yet you say foreign minister was not there. Anyway, yes, please.
Foreign Secretary Russia from Times Now. So, Austrian foreign minister is also coming in, and as we discussed, there will be bilaterals. Will India...
Australian you said, right?
Australian.
You talked of Australian foreign minister. Yeah.
We didn't hear you clearly. Yeah.
Okay. Australian foreign minister is also coming in. So we have seen a lot of separatism movement gaining momentum in Australia, and there have been some attacks on Indians as well there. Will that be brought up in the meeting?
In the bilateral?
Bilateral, yeah.
Can I say ditto what he said to anyway? Parikshit had, and you had one question. This we'll close with that.
Sir, on the issue of counter-terrorism, yes, I'm Parikshit from
yes,
CNBC. Yes, cryptocurrencies was discussed in great detail at the finance ministers meeting, but in the line of terror financing, could we expect the foreign ministers to give further guidance to the Financial Stability Board and other task forces under the G20 on how to approach the issue of cryptocurrency regulations from the point of view of terrorism?
Okay, and we'll take one last question here. No, yeah, you've been raising your hand. No, not there. Here, आपके, please.
सर मैं मधुरेंद्र न्यूज़ नेशन से जैसे कि यूक्रेन वॉर से जो अस्थिरता
नहीं, यूक्रेन पे क्वेश्चन को ही लूँगा, तो फिर आप शुरू मत कीजिए।
सर रिलेटेड जैसे कि यूक्रेन वॉर से अस्थिरता का सवाल दुनिया के सामने है, ठीक उसी तरह से चीन के भी रवैये से दुनिया के सामने अस्थिरता का सवाल है, चाहे वो ताइवान के फ्रंट पर देखें, चाहे इंडो चाइना कन्फ्लिक्ट के मुद्दे पर आप देखें या जापान सी की तरफ देखें, तो क्या चीन के इस रवैये को लेकर भी कोई बड़ी वार्ता होने वाली है? क्या G20 के देश जो हैं
G20 में
क्या चीन के इस जो रवैया है, खासतौर पे आक्रामक रवैया है, उस पर भी बातचीत करेंगे ताकि
आपको मालूम है ना कि ये कंसेंसस का ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है और चीन भी इसके एक मेंबर हैं।
बिल्कुल
ठीक है, इसको जानते हुए भी पूछ रहे हैं ना? ठीक है।
देखिए, मैं आखिरी प्रश्न से पहले शुरू करता हूँ। विदेश मंत्री की वार्ता का क्या एजेंडा होगा वो आप सबको सामने बता दिया गया है, आप उसमें से निर्धारित कर लीजिए क्या आएगा क्या नहीं आएगा। लेकिन मैं जितना विस्तार में उसके बारे में बोल चुका हूँ, मैं चाहूँ तो पढ़ के भी चाहूँ तो और इससे अधिक नहीं बोल पाऊँगा करके, तो आप कृपया उसको मद्देनज़र रखें और उस हिसाब से देखें। To your question with regard to Japan, you know, as I've already said, our partnership with Japan, bilateral as also what we do together in G20, is something which is of great value to us. And we have absolutely no doubt going into tomorrow's meeting of the foreign ministers that our discussion, Japanese delegation's participation in that meeting would be something which will bring a tremendous value to the G20 deliberations. With regard to your questions on the question on the Quad foreign ministers meeting, well, we'll let you know as and when something works out, something which at this stage we are not aware of. To your question on the Australian foreign minister's visit, I would simply repeat a variation of the answer that I gave to Kavita ji. I can give a more extensive answer, but then that would not be fair to Kavita ji. So I think it's for the two ministers to decide really what they focus on. But obviously, all issues that are part of the bilateral discussions and issues of regional importance would naturally be a part of those discussions. Parikshit, to your question on the cryptocurrencies and the other things that there are many elements of when you talk of countering terrorism, there are many sub-verticals that you need to deal with. Money laundering is one of them. Narco financing is another of them, which, as you know, is one of the very old issues when you talk of terrorism going back to early 90s, etc. Now, crypto is relatively new in that sense. It's a fintech issue because it's essentially a financial product that emerges, which is centered in technology, pretty much. Abroad, what we expect from tomorrow's meeting of the foreign ministers meeting is a very clear, strong, all-encompassing message on the problem of terrorism, on its challenges, and on the need for the G20 countries to come together to fight, address, and defeat it comprehensively. Naturally, crypto would form one constituent of it, one of the constituent of it, and as you yourself observed, the finance ministers and the central bank governors meeting in Bangalore devoted extensive time onto this issue and has already discussed that at length. But at tomorrow's meeting, the larger challenge of counter-terrorism, counter-narcotics would be in focus with the foreign ministers, and we hope to get some clear recommendation coming out of that from that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate particularly your patience in taking so many questions, sir. Thank you also to Abhay for your presence here. Thanks. Good afternoon.